in yesterday what we were dealing with the idea of uh, what is macroeconomic, in the sense that in what way macroeconomic is microeconomic is important. And one of the things that we discussed yesterday, or rather few of the things we discussed, we started off with the concept of resources are scarce. That is the first key point. And because resources are scarce, both from the perspective of consumer or from the perspective of producer, depending upon which side you are in, if you are a consumer, you'd like to consume or spread your consumption in such a fashion so that the marginal return from consuming any goods and services is maximum. Likewise, if you are a producer, you are consuming or you are actually investing in a fashion so that the marginal return from each dollar that you are investing, you are getting the maximum benefit in terms of profit that you are perceiving. Now, the reason why I ask you that in what way this welfare thing fits in, be it from the idea of consumer or from the idea of producer, it is actually defined by two very simple things. One is called the consumer surplus. I don't know whether you have heard this word. Uh, so the consumer surplus is basically trying to tell you that how much you are able to uh, save. So let me try to uh, use some, because yesterday we also discussed that in the context of producer, when he supply anything, that is basically his marginal cost of production. And when the consumer is actually consuming anything, that is the marginal benefit. So if I were to understand the welfare, so let's say that we are planning to understand the welfare. If I'm talking about the consumer, this is called the consumer surplus. And if we are talking in terms of the producer, it is the producer surplus. And I will just explain in a bit what both of this mean. But given the discussion we were having yesterday, this consumer, his or her objective function is to maximize utility. And if I am the producer, my objective function is to maximize profit. Okay. Now, what I was trying to argue yesterday is, depending upon which side you are. So let's say that for the first unit that you are consuming, you are always willing to pay a higher price. Okay. Now, why is it that you want to pay a higher price? So it's like this, that because the first unit I'm consuming, this is the first unit, and therefore the perceived benefit that I'm getting is maximum from the first unit. So in this case, let's try to think like this. Let's say that I have something, my demand curve. Now, when you have a demand curve, typically what I have is price and quantity. Now, when I'm thinking of the consumer, now go back to the discussion we had yesterday, which is, for the first unit, are you going to pay the maximum price? Yes or no? That you are consuming. And by the way, this is a partial equilibrium analysis because we are considering only one good. Okay. So let's say that the coconut water example I was giving you yesterday. In the coconut water example which I gave you yesterday, what you have is, for the first unit, the price that you are willing to give is let's say this is the price that I'm willing to give for the first unit. Okay. For the second unit, because you have already consumed the first unit, the perceived benefit or the utility that you are going to get from this by consuming the second unit, it is going to be more or less.
Less.
It is going to be less. So for the second unit, let's say that you are willing to pay this much price. Okay. For the third unit, you are going to pay even a lesser price. So because you have been consuming the same commodity, as I am saying that this is a partial equilibrium analysis, which means that I am dealing with the same commodity. And let's say for the final commodity, because you cannot have more than, let's say, 4 unit of coconut water, let's say for the fourth unit, you are willing to pay this much price. Okay. So if I add on this as to how much you are going to pay for each unit, you see a downward sloping curve, and this is what we are calling as the demand curve. So the demand curve is directly coming from the concept of utility maximization, because as we consume more and more amount of same commodity, our willingness to pay price keeps on falling. So as you can see, as I'm consuming more unit of the same good, my willingness to pay price is falling. Is that clear to all of you? So therefore, the demand curve is downward sloping, because typically people will argue demand curve is downward sloping because the higher the price, the lesser is the demand. So that is the easiest way to define. But if you think very intuitively, why the demand curve is downward sloping, the reason for demand curve to be downward sloping is because of the fact that as you consume more of one good, and that's why I'm using the word partial equilibrium analysis. In the context of partial equilibrium analysis, as I'm using more unit of the same good, my willingness to pay for that same commodity, it keeps on falling, and therefore you see that the demand curve is downward sloping. Any question?
Sir, is this slope applicable everywhere?
Is the slope constant everywhere?
Applicable everywhere?
Applicable
No,
means?
sir. Sir, in practicality, if we try to understand this, is it
Yeah,
applicable everywhere?
yes, because that's exactly what I was trying to explain. That for the first unit of coconut, you are going to pay a higher price. For the second unit,
Right.
you are going to pay a lesser amount what you paid for the first unit, because you have already consumed it. For the third unit, you are going to even offer even a lesser price than what you have offered in the first unit. Are you getting my point? So
So,
basically,
okay, if we take example of coffee, let's say
okay,
coffee. So,
yes,
yeah, generally the price of coffee is a bit higher than tea.
right.
So the people, yeah, there are some people with some sort of thinking that they think that okay, if a coffee is a bottle of coffee is expensive, so they just shift on to tea. They prefer tea. So basically, if the price is higher, the demand is also lower.
No, so
So
please understand,
yeah.
this is the key
You're
word.
talking about
We are
substitute.
no, we haven't gone into substitute, complement. We have not gone into that. All I'm saying, when I'm using the word partial equilibrium analysis, basically I'm saying I'm dealing with one commodity. It can be tea, it can be coffee, it can be your telephone bill, it can be your electricity bill, it can be your air conditioner. I'm just looking into one commodity and trying to explain why for that particular commodity the demand curve is downward sloping. You know, so even what I just now said is applicable for your tea coffee example. All I'm trying to argue, even in the context of your coffee, if the price, the first, let's say you have gone, which typically happens, let's say you're taking a train, you're going somewhere for your vacation. On the first cup, of course they don't demand much, but the first cup that you consume when you wake up early in the morning, Whether this vendor is charging you 5 or 6 rupees doesn't matter, you just want to have it. But for the second cup, you then become price conscious a little bit, because you already have had that first cup of tea. In the second cup, you think, okay, I'll take, but maybe if the price is little lesser, For the third cup, you already have reached the satisfaction level. You don't want to consume anymore. So all I'm trying to argue that in a partial equilibrium analysis, when we are dealing with a single commodity, the more we consume for that particular type of commodity, the more we consume, the lesser is the willingness to pay. And if you remember, yesterday also I said about another thing, that this concept we are talking about also depends upon the time frame, because having coffee in the morning is not same as having coffee in the evening. I might still be wanting to have coffee in the evening once my class gets over. But again, please understand, when we are dealing with the partial equilibrium analysis, when we are dealing with this downward sloping demand curve, I am talking about at a given point of time. This is a static analysis. That's why it's also called a static partial equilibrium analysis. It's basically trying to argue that what happens at any given point of time if you consume more unit of same good. Is it clear? We haven't got into the concept of substitute. We haven't got into the concept of complement. That is something that we are going to discuss in the next chapter, when we also include concept like elasticity and things like that. Any other question? Please ask question, otherwise you will not clear your doubt. Can I erase this? Okay. So basically,
Yes, sir.
So now we know that in the context of partial equilibrium analysis, which is a static kind of model, what happens is my demand curve is downward sloping. So that is something from the perspective of what? Producer or consumer?
Consumer.
Produce.
Consumer.
Yeah. So Yagna
Consumer.
has woken up. That's a good thing. Okay, so let's try to now understand what happens with the producer. So we are also going to do the same analysis, which is again, it's a partial equilibrium static analysis. Now think of this. For the producer, so I again have the price, I also have the quantity. Okay. Now let me first draw something and then try to argue, or then try to see that whether what I'm doing is making sense. So typically the supply curve looks like something like this. So this is my supply curve, and the supply curve is also called, and this we are going to deal when we do in the cost curve, it's called the marginal cost of production. Okay. So the supply curve is also known as the marginal cost of production. I have now two questions for you. What this graph is showing is, even at 0 unit of output, I still have certain amount of price that the producer has to charge, and as I keep on increasing the supply of output, which is from 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 units and 4 unit, let's say, the per unit cost of supplying is increasing. Now the question which I have for you is, why you think that at 0 quantity, ideally at 0 quantity, no one is going to give him any price, and therefore we should think of this is starting at 1 quantity where he is charging the price what he has assumed for the 0 plus some incremental price. So let's say that he is charging this additional price including he's priced that, so this is the marginal price or the marginal cost, because between 0 and 1 my cost of supply has gone up by this red color line. Between 0 and 2 my cost of supply, the marginal cost of supply has gone up by this amount. Okay, now the question which I have for you is, why you think A, the producer has to incur some cost even though he is supplying 0 unit of output, and B, why you think that over a period of time, as he is selling more unit of quantity, the per unit price is increasing.
So the demand is increasing. That's why.
The demand is
Demand is
decreasing.
increasing. Okay,
Right.
so the demand is increasing, but the demand curve, let's try to juxtapose the demand curve on this. Let's see that if I were to draw a demand curve is falling like this, you know. So that's my demand curve.
Demand is decreasing, sir, because of law of diminishing return.
Law of diminishing return. Who says that?
Aditya, sir.
Anchit.
Aditya, sir.
Aditya. Okay. Anchit, you have something to add?
Yes, so that graph basically explains the basic minimum fixed costs the company is bearing.
Very good.
So hence it demands that minimum this cost is required for me to not to go bankrupt in a longer period of time. And the second the second part of the question is why the graph is increasing, right?
Yeah.
So basically, if the revenues keep on increasing over the period of time,
Right.
so some percentage of the fixed costs are being covered. So later in the part of the company's processes, the extra variable cost which is being bared is supposed to be covered. You know, uh,
So I
I'm not.
totally agree with your first part of the answer. I am
Yes, sir.
still not convinced about the second part. But because you have said the first part correctly, can you tell in a very layman term, although I understood that, but for your other mates,
Yes, sir.
आप हिंदी में भी बता सकते हो, so that all of us understand. Can you tell us why?
So,
What is that fixed cost? Can
sir,
you give an example?
fixed cost can be seen as in you take the salary of the employees, so
Yeah.
that you have to give all the wages to the laborers. You have to give the wages even if you're not producing any output in the factory. So and also the rentals can be considered as fixed charges, because even if you don't come to the office, or you don't do any processes in the time being, you still have to pay the rent. So those are the charges which are fixed no matter what happens. So those are the charges which the company expects to be recovered. So those are, I mean, there are many domains of the fixed charges. These are some examples.
Okay. So let me, yeah. So that partially correct, and I'll tell you why partially correct. Because labor is something you can actually do away with. So labor costs typically come under the variable cost.
Yes,
Fixed
actually, it's
cost,
variable. If we if we recruit more labor, the charges go up.
yes.
Yes.
But typically what happens is fixed cost means the brick and mortar cost. Let's say you are supplying, you are in the business of supplying, let's say this particular marker, you know. Now, in order to supply the marker, you need to first have the factory. You need to first have the electricity. You need to first buy the machine. Now, the machine factories are something that before you start manufacturing, this is the cost that you have to incur for you to start manufacturing. Therefore, what we say that there is an element of fixed cost which the manufacturer has to bear irrespective of whether he or she wants to manufacture something, because there is an element of brick and mortar cost, in the sense that you will have to build the factory shed, you will have to buy the machine which helps you to produce even the first unit of output. Okay, is that understood? So this element that we are talking about, this element of cost is coming from the fixed cost. Now the second element of the cost is basically, now the fixed cost is given, meaning that if I go like this, my fixed cost is given. Of course, you can argue that over a period of time there is a depreciation, but let's, for the time being, let's not try to bring that depreciation factor into account. In a very simplistic world, let's assume that the depreciation cost is 0, and therefore let's assume that the fixed cost is given, which is the cost of setting up the factory, which is the cost of buying the machine. And then with each additional unit that I am producing, my variable cost. So this thing, that upward sloping line, which is my supply curve, is basically suggesting that the variable cost is increasing. Okay, so variable cost is increasing in what fashion? It is increasing with per unit amount of production. Now that was my second question. Why you think variable cost is increasing with each additional unit of production? I hear someone said a few minutes back, diminishing return to scale. Now, the answer is yes, but can you explain? I see one hand being raised. So can you, Aditya, can you explain this?
Sir, actually, there was something else on I was thinking.
Yeah.
As the amount produced is increased, so is the amount of raw material used, and probably because of that, more raw material is used. That's why the cost of production is also increased. That may be
In a way, yes. So let's try to think about this. Initially, when you are, let's say, operating, you have procured some goods and services from your local area. Okay. Let's say I have opened this factory in the neighborhood of Greater Noida. Initially, the labor is coming from the nearby village areas, or even the machines that you have purchased. You have already purchased that machine, so that's part of fixed cost. Now the variable cost is initially you're hiring these laborers from your neighborhood areas, and you are also selling in your neighborhood areas. Whatever pen or markers you are producing, you are selling in the neighborhood areas. So the variable costs more or less remain the same. But as your business expands, your logistic cost increases, because now you will have to ship your markers outside your area of where you are manufacturing. Now maybe you will have to hire more and more skilled laborers who know the art of making markers. So therefore, as your factory expand, the variable cost increases, because the cost of procuring additional laborers, the cost of logistic cost, all of this goes up. Not only this, I also said that there is also something called diminishing return to scale, which means given the number of machine which I'm using to produce the markers, for the first few units of laborers, each laborers were more productive. But as I am increasing the number of laborers, what it implies, it means that unless and otherwise I buy additional machines, the additional laborers which are coming into my factory floor, they had to work with the same number of machines, and therefore the productivity of each additional workers which we are hiring, their productivity is falling. So the variable cost is increasing because of two accounts. The first is my search cost is increasing. Search cost of increasing why? Because the variable factors, that is also scarce. And second, because my fixed cost is given, because my number of machines are given, with each additional variable factors I am introducing in my factory floor, the per unit additional marginal benefit coming from that worker is falling because of diminishing return to marginal output of this laborers or workers. Does it make sense? I'm giving you 2 minutes. Think through this.
So,
what I just said.
sir, I just want to understand one thing. Sir, what this means is that the efficiency of the workers decreases over time.
Yes, efficiency of the worker decreases, but the big assumption here is I'm not introducing additional machines, because the moment I introduce additional machines, then the labor productivity again increases. It's like this. Let's say I'm actually trying to teach you some mathematical programming or statistical programming, something that we'll be doing in my research methodology class. And I ask you that in the university laboratory, there is only 3 computers for you guys to work with. Now, because in terms of numbers, let's say there are 15 of you, and I'm just assigning only 3 computers, what happens? You have to jostle for that space to get your turn to be able to use computer. And therefore, per hour of, let's say, mathematical project that you are able to solve or undertake is going to fall because the number of machines are limited. And that thing is going to increase if I increase the number of students from 15 to, let's say, 30. So then the waiting time will again increase. So therefore, the marginal output coming from each laborers is falling with each additional unit of laborers I am introducing, given the amount of fixed capital. Now, in the second case, what I'm arguing is you are also seeing that the search cost, let's say that there are only few good mechanics who are adept at how to manufacture the market. So once I have actually populated my factories with the first sets of good workers, good in the sense they are more productive, for the second set of worker, I have to look for them. So my search cost increases, and there is no guarantee that the first or the second lot of worker will be as productive as the first lot, irrespective of whether I give them the machines or not. So the productivity or the variable cost is increasing, one, because of diminishing return to productivity, because as I am keeping my machine fixed and I am increasing the number of labor, the productivity is falling per unit additional laborers I am introducing. And second, I also have to look or search for this newer type of or the skill type of labors. Not only that, my logistic cost, if I want to spread my market beyond my area, which is beyond this Greater Noida region, then what happens is, because I'm spreading out, my logistic cost, my transport cost, these are all part of the variable cost. That increases, and therefore what happens is the supply curve is upward sloping. Is it making sense?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, but the cost of production or the margin in one product will remain the same.
Again, cost of margin.
So yes, a margin on one product. Suppose you are making a product for 50 rupees and you are selling for 70 rupees. So the
Yes.
margin is 20 rupees. So that margin will remain the same. If means we cannot include those things, and I don't understand then why.
Yeah.
Why should we? Yeah.
So that's a very pertinent question. You are saying that you are selling the product flat at 70 rupees and your margin is 20 rupees, right? That's what you are saying.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is also exactly what I'm trying to get at. Now, assume that in this particular market, okay, in this particular market, what is the equilibrium? This is my equilibrium. Let's try to draw this. So in this particular market, this is my demand, this is my supply, and therefore my equilibrium price is this one, and equilibrium quantity which I am able to sell is this much. Okay. So let's say that, going by your example, now let's try to erase this. Going by your example, that's a very valid question which you have raised. Let's try to erase this. Now you are saying that this guy is selling whatever unit he is selling with a margin of 20 rupees, right? So in this case, what is happening? So now let me go back to my original figure, which I drew, which is I have my this is my, let's say, supply, and this is my demand, and the equilibrium is, I'll go by your example, which is, let's say he is able to sell 70 units, right? And he is charging price of, this is my price, so let's say, and this is my quantity. So he is able to sell 70 units, and at a price, let's say he's charging a per unit price of 5 rupees. Okay, so if he's selling 70 units, that means he's getting rupees 350 as total revenue, right? Now your question was, if I understand you correctly, is how come you're saying that his per unit he is making this much profit? You know, let's say that in this amount he is earning total revenue, he is making per unit profit of rupees 2. You know, this is
right.
what was your argument, right? So here is how it works. So what you are seeing here is, this is the final equilibrium price. Okay, this is the final equilibrium price. But guess what? For the first 10 units, what he sold, he is actually making a profit of, because his cost of production is
3 rupees.
His cost of production is maybe, for the first 10 unit, his cost of production is,
Okay.
let's say 1 unit. You know, so basically he's making a profit of 4 units, because here he is still getting the marginal price 5. For the second 40 units, let's say he's selling at a price of 3 rupees. So here he's making 2 rupees. So this rupees 2 that you are saying, it is the average price of each. If I add on this thing, because this is basically the producer surplus, if I add on this and divide it with the number of units of good he is able to sell, so this is called producer surplus. So if I divide the producer surplus, this is the total money, this is the total profit he is making. Okay, if I divide the producer surplus with the amount of goods that he has sold, I get this per unit, that 2 rupees that you were talking about. Does it make sense? Are you convinced?
So I still not understand.
Which
Sir,
thing you don't understand?
Sir, all I want to say is cost of production for 1 unit is, let's suppose for 1 unit it is 3 rupees, and I am selling up that on particular rate of 5 rupees.
Right.
So I am making profit of 2 rupees
Right.
in 1 unit.
Right.
So, sir, the cost of production of 1 unit is always, it should be same always.
No.
Why is the cost of production increasing? That's my point. That's my question.
No, cost of production is increasing. So when you produce in any factory, you don't produce like 1 unit or 2 unit. You just produce in bulk, right?
Right,
Have you seen any
Yeah.
factory which is producing 1 bicycle?
Yeah.
They produce in
No.
bulk, right? All we are trying to argue, let's say this particular factory has produced, let's say 500 units of bicycle. All I'm trying to argue is, for that 500 units of bicycle this factory has produced or manufactured, the first unit in marginal terms, the marginal cost of producing the first unit of bicycle is less than the second unit of bicycle, is less than the third unit of bicycle, because as you are increasing your production from first to second to third, I am actually going up in my, of course in the final, when I'm selling this 500 bicycle, I'm selling at a particular price. It is not that I'm selling the first unit at let's say per unit bicycle, I'm charging the price for this 500 units of bicycle. Per unit bicycle, I'm charging a price 2000 rupees, So when you buy any bicycle, you don't see that because you're buying the first, you go and negotiate with the factory, you're saying that, okay, I'm buying the first unit and therefore you give me at 1200. The answer is no. He is going to charge the price at which the market clear, because his objective is what? His objective is to maximize his profit, right? And where he is going to maximize his profit, where his asking price is matching the price the consumer is going to pay, which is the price I'm willing to procure. Now, you as a consumer, maybe you are interested in a single unit of bicycle. But when the market of bicycle is there, I don't see it's a single bike. It's like a market for some type of bicycle. In that market, what is the total amount which is produced and what is the total amount which is in demand? Given the total amount, I'm saying that 70 units of bicycle which is being sold in the market. For the total amount, this particular guy who is in the business of selling bicycle, he is saying that I am only going to supply up to this point, because beyond this point, my price is in excess of what the consumer is willing to pay. Because beyond this point, because if I look into, let's say, this 80 units of bicycle here, the consumer is willing to pay this much, but he is asking a price this much, because his variable cost has shot up to that extent that he is no more able to supply this 80 bicycle at one go at this price. He has to charge a higher price. So don't get confused because what you are getting at, you are trying to suggest per unit. What I am suggesting is no way different than what you are thinking, but all I'm trying to say that when the market clear, it is not on the basis of a single bike. It is on the basis of, because what is the definition of market? It is a collection of buyers and collection of sellers, right? So when I have a collection of buyers and sellers, then the market price, again, we'll talk about in details when we go into the market structure. But for the time being, please understand that why this market, why this is upward sloping, because as I am producing more and more unit of output, the variable component cost increases for two reasons. One is diminishing productivity of the variable factors, and second, increasing search cost to get the more productive workers. And therefore, finally, when I'm selling, I'm actually selling 70 units of bike, and finally, when I'm calculating the per unit, how much I've made the profit, I'm actually dividing how much total revenue I'm generating divided by total number of bike I'm able to sell, and then I'm trying to see what is the, so basically what is the producer surplus. The producer surplus is basically, if I were to showcase this, the producer surplus is basically, so for the first unit, so the producer surplus, going by the discussion we had, is, let's say the market is clearing at this price. So you can understand for the first unit, the consumer is actually paying this much. For the second unit, the consumer is paying this much. For the third unit, the consumer is actually paying this much. Why actually paying this much? Because the market is clearing at this price, Although his marginal cost of production for the first unit is given by this. So the marginal cost of production for the first unit is given by this amount. Marginal cost of production for the second unit is given by this amount. For the third unit is given by this amount. So this region, which I am marking in red color, this is called the producer surplus. In a way, this is kind of profit for the entrepreneurs. Now, go to the other extreme, which is, think of you as a consumer. For the consumer, exactly opposite things are happening. Because for the first unit, he is willing to pay this much amount of price. But actually, he is ending up paying this much amount of price. For the second unit, the consumer is willing to pay this much amount of price, but he is ending up paying this much amount of price. For the third unit, he is willing to pay this much amount of price, but he is ending up paying this much. So this thing, which I'm marking in blue color, this is called the consumer surplus. Now, we will discuss later, but for the time being, market cleared at a point when the way to make additional gain from trading becomes zero. So why? Because beyond this point, which I'm calling, let's say this point is O, beyond this point O, the producer will charge a price because his marginal cost of production will increase so much so more that, and even the consumer side, from the consumer side, their willingness to pay will come so much so less, the market does not clear. So the market clear under condition when the element of making additional consumer surplus, or for that matter producer surplus, become zero. So that is the market equilibrium. Please ask any question if you have, because this is a little bit, this definition, what I'm trying to give you is much more intuitive than what otherwise the textbook would suggest. But think through this, because we are dealing with the classical school of thought, which is basically saying that depending upon whether the consumer or the producer, why first of all the demand curve is downward sloping, because for each additional unit that I am consuming in a static framework, I am willing to offer less and less amount of price. Why the supply curve is upward sloping? Because for each additional unit that I am producing, the variable cost is increasing, and therefore the marginal cost is upward sloping. So this is my demand curve, this is my supply curve. Supply curve is upward sloping because marginal cost is increasing. Demand curve is downward sloping because my utility or the satisfaction is falling. Okay, so keep this in mind. Now the other thing I wanted to tell you is, now we have understood that why the marginal cost curve is upward sloping, why the demand curve is downward sloping. Now there is another element which I wanted to, in continuation of what we were dealing yesterday, is how much the economy will produce, and that is given by what is called the production possibility frontier. Now the production possibility frontier basically tells you that how much the economy can produce. Now again, because we are dealing with a 2D kind of thing, meaning that I'm just drawing, it's a two-dimensional thing, and let's say that I have the option to produce, let's say, car. I also have the option to produce, let's say, cotton shirts. Okay, and typically you will find that the production possibility frontier, which is defined as how much the maximum amount of output this particular economy is producing, this is called the production possibility frontier. Now the production possibility frontier is, you will see, it is concave to the origin. Now my question is, why you think the production possibility frontier is concave to the origin? And what is the beauty of economics is, one concept you can actually apply in variety of ways, So here again, the idea is, the reason why it is shaped like this, which is concave, it's a concave function, has to do with, again, diminishing return to scale. Again, diminishing return to scale is the concept that we used while we are trying to understand that why the marginal cost of production, the variable cost, is upward sloping. Can anyone think why is it that in what way we can actually use this concept of diminishing return to scale when we are to look into this particular shape of production possibility frontier?
So because of limited number of resources and a given technology, a given set of technology, we can, if we allocate resources to produce cotton shirts, more number of resources, then automatically the production of number of cars will go down, and the vice versa. So for
Yes.
that reason, the shape is concave to the origin.
Now you are saying, okay, let me take a cue from what you just now mentioned. Let's say that the society has the choice to produce this much units of car or this much unit of cotton shirts. Now let's assume that the society decide that, okay, now instead of producing let's say that this is 100 units of car, okay, and this is, let's say, 1000 units of cotton shirts. Now if the number of cars production falls from 90 to so in this case, either I'm producing 100 units of car. If I'm producing 100 units of car, I'm basically producing 0 cotton shirt. But what you are saying here is the moment I reduce from 100 units to 90 units of cars, then all of a sudden the number of cotton shirts which I'm able to produce goes up drastically. But this is something that maybe you are mentioning, that as a society I can decide. But my question is a little bit deeper than that. Of course, we can decide whether I want to produce 90 units of car and 400 units of shirts, or for that matter, if I actually come down a little bit more, which is, let's say, 80 units of car. Now I am actually producing, let's say, 600 units of shirt. My question is, because in both the cases, when I'm coming from 100 to 90, and here also from 90 to 80, in both the cases, I'm actually reducing the number of cars by 10 units. Here also I'm reducing the number of cars by 10 units. But in the first case, when I'm reducing the number of cars by 10 units, my amount of cotton shirts which I'm producing, it is increasing in the first case by 400, and in the second case it is only increasing by 200. My question was, and this is happening because of this particular shape of this production possibility frontier, which is concave to the origin. My question is, what diminishing return to scale has to do with this story that I'm trying to sell?
So that
Actually, it relates to the marginal opportunity cost, as with each increase in unit of production of one product, the other product needs to be sacrificed.
Okay, but other product has to be sacrificed, but that is fine. We are seeing the sacrifice happening, 10 units of cars we are sacrificing, but in the initial stage that has led to much more increment in the number of cotton shirts, 400. In the second stage it is only leading to 200. So why is this difference?
So maybe for the very same reason that the productivity of, let's say, the
Yes.
labor in the case
Okay,
is
so
decreased.
let me try to explain. Now in this particular economy, whether we are talking about car, whether we are talking about shirt, now this is typically, let's assume that this is a labor intensive industry, and the way I'm defining labor intensive industry is basically saying that this requires more labor, and this is a capital intensive industry, which is like automobile, which requires more machine. Okay, now what happens is, initially assume that in this particular economy there are 100 laborers, right? Now out of these 100 laborers, there are few engineers and there are few, let's say, unskilled laborers, who are better at manufacturing or making shirts. Okay, now what happens is, when I'm actually using all my resources, because all my resources is this 100 laborers, which also include both skilled laborers, which are more adept in making the cars, skilled laborers or engineers. It also includes laborers who are not that qualified, but they are okay. But they are okay in making shirts. Okay. So when I'm actually using all the laborers, which include both the engineers and the otherwise so-called unskilled laborers, what happens is the productivity is actually, meaning that both of them are actually producing cars. But when I'm actually producing 10 units less, then what happens is these laborers who are actually better in producing cotton shirts, they are the first one to actually leave the automobile industry and they will join the cotton shirts industry. And therefore, because initially they have joined, the marginal productivity becomes the best, And then what happens is the second lots of laborers who are better in producing the cotton shirts, they go and join the shirts industry. And at this extreme, you will see that the marginal increment is less because the engineers themselves, they don't know how much or how to, they are not that great in designing the cotton shirts. And therefore the marginal productivity falls. And this is the diminishing return to scale that we are talking about. Is that clear?